I drove 6 hours for Christmas, but my brother laughed and said, "This year's just for family." Minutes later, his wife's text made me smile as I cut off every payment I covered. By morning, he begged to talk. I'm 32M, and honestly, I should have seen it coming long before that Christmas Eve. The signs were there, just subtle enough that I ignored them. My brother's calls were getting shorter, replies to my texts slower, and whenever I mentioned holiday plans, the conversation would die out like he'd suddenly lost interest. I told myself it was just holiday stress. People get busy, right? Families get overwhelmed during the season. I convinced myself everything was fine because the alternative was too painful to consider. The drive to his house took exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes. I knew every stretch of that route by heart. I'd been making this trip for years since he moved to the suburbs with his wife and kids. Long stretches of highway where my mind could drift, sleepy little towns where I'd stop for coffee, and finally the wide, quiet streets where the houses got bigger and the driveways longer. His house was at the end of one of those streets, perfectly trimmed hedges and Christmas lights framing the windows like a magazine spread. I arrived at 2:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, the trunk full of carefully wrapped presents for my nieces and nephews, plus a bottle of expensive wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. From the outside, everything screamed holiday warmth. The lights glowed softly in the winter dusk, silhouettes of children ran across the living room, and I could hear muffled laughter through the glass. My nephew's little bike was propped against the garage, still wearing the streamers from his birthday. I carried the gifts up the stone path, heart light with the kind of simple happiness that comes from being part of a family celebration. Before I could even knock, the door opened. My brother stood there in his pajamas, nearly 3 p.m., with a look I can only describe as cold amusement. He glanced at me, then at the gifts and then back to me, and he laughed. Not his old, easygoing laugh from when we were kids, but something sharp like he was laughing at me, not with me. "This year is just for family," he said, almost casual. "Maybe you should have called first." I froze. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Behind him, I could hear the rustle of wrapping paper, the delighted squeals of kids, the warm chaos of Christmas. The kind of Christmas I thought I'd been driving toward. My arms tightened around the gifts as I tried to process what had just happened. He didn't apologize. He didn't look uncertain. He just stood there. I turned around without a word and walked back to my car. My hands shook as I shoved the gifts into the trunk. I didn't look back to see if he was still standing in the doorway. I started the engine and pulled away in silence. 20 minutes down the road, my phone buzzed. A message. My heart leapt for a second. Maybe an apology, maybe an explanation. I pulled into a rest stop and opened it. It was from my sister-in-law, but it wasn't meant for me. Why would that loser even show up? It read, *, I can't believe he drove all that way. Pathetic. I stared at the words, cold spreading through me like ice water. I read it 3 times just to be sure. There it was, in writing, the casual cruelty, the contempt. I wasn't family. I wasn't welcome. I was a joke. A punchline to be shared in group chats. Then I remembered the payments. Over the last 3 years, I'd quietly been covering a staggering number of their expenses. It started with their mortgage when his wife left her job to stay home with the kids. Then the car payments, insurance, private school tuition, credit card bills, streaming services, even grocery delivery. I'd set up automatic transfers and never made a big deal about it because I thought that's what family does. I had a good job, no kids, and helping my brother felt right. I didn't realize I'd become nothing but a wallet to them. Sitting in that rest stop, I opened my laptop and logged in. Mortgage assistance $2, $400. Car payment $580. Tuition $1, $800. On and on it went over $6, $500 a month. Almost $250,000 in 3 years. I started canceling them one by one. Each click felt like a tiny piece of my dignity being restored. Mortgage? Canceled. Car? Gone. Insurance, school fees, credit cards, all of it. By the time I was done, the sun had set and the parking lot was empty. I drove home in silence, feeling strangely calm. The next morning, I turned my phone on. 68 missed calls. Dozens of texts. My brother's tone went from confused to desperate to furious as the day unfolded. Mortgage declined. Car payment overdue. School calling. Credit cards maxed out. By midnight, a single text came through, "We need to talk." I let a week pass before I agreed to meet him. I suggested a coffee shop halfway between our cities' neutral ground. When I arrived, he was already there, hunched over in the corner, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His wife wasn't with him, and I was grateful for that. The moment I sat down, he launched into a frantic monologue. Why would I cut off support without warning? Did I know what this was doing to his kids? How could I do this to family? His voice was rising, drawing stares from the other customers, but I stayed quiet until he ran out of breath. Then I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of his wife's text. I watched the color drain from his face as he read it. He stammered out excuses. She was stressed, she didn't mean it, people say things they don't mean. But the truth was already out. I told him how it felt to drive 6 hours with presents for his kids, only to be turned away on the doorstep. I told him how the text just confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't family to him. I was a bank account. He kept circling back to the money. When would the payments start again? How far behind they already were? How I was dooming his kids to suffer. I listened, but my decision didn't change. I explained that family is supposed to be mutual, built on love and respect. I had no interest in being an ATM for people who mocked me behind my back. He grew angry then, accusing me of being petty, of holding his kids hostage over a single text. He said I had no responsibilities, no kids, and plenty of money, implying that I owed it to him. I stood up, told him there was nothing more to discuss, and walked out. He followed me to the parking lot, still trying to negotiate, offering apologies and promises, but I drove away without looking back. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, I've learned through mutual friends that they had to sell their house, enroll the kids in public school, and his wife went back to work. My parents have begged me to reconsider, but I showed them the text. They still think I'm being harsh. I've blocked my brother and his wife, changed my number, and told everyone I'm done with that dynamic. And here's the thing, I feel lighter. For years, I carried the weight of their lives on my shoulders without realizing it. I sacrificed my own happiness, my own dreams, for a family that didn't even respect me. Now that money goes toward me. I booked a trip to Europe. I started investing in my future. I even started dating again. Looking back, that cold rejection on Christmas Eve was the best gift I could have received. It forced me to face the truth and finally put myself first. I no longer live under the illusion that financial support equals love. Family should be built on mutual respect, not obligation and mockery. This past Christmas, I spent the day alone, cooking myself a nice dinner, watching old movies, and feeling genuinely at peace. Next year, I plan to volunteer at a local shelter, where kindness will actually matter. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, and refusing to be treated like a fool ever again. It's been months now since that Christmas, and the quiet in my life has become something I never knew I needed. The constant buzzing of my phone, the emotional weight of feeling responsible for someone else's life, and the guilt they used to weaponize against me. All of it is gone. I finally feel like I can breathe. My apartment, once just a place I slept between work trips and family obligations, now feels like a home. I cook for myself, decorate the way I want, and wake up on weekends without the heaviness of unspoken expectations. My parents still bring up my brother every now and then. They try to paint it as a tragedy. How the kids are adjusting to a smaller house. How the family is struggling without my help. At first, I felt a pang of guilt. These are my nieces and nephews, after all. But then I remember the look on my brother's face when he laughed at me on his doorstep. I remember the casual cruelty of that text message, the one that revealed how little they valued me beyond my bank account. Family isn't just blood. Family is respect, kindness, and appreciation. Without those things, all that's left is obligation, and I refuse to carry that weight anymore. I've started to truly enjoy the life I'd neglected for so long. The trip to Europe was life-changing. I walked the streets of Paris, hiked in the Swiss Alps, and even learned to cook pasta from scratch in Italy. It was the first time in years that I spent money on experiences that were purely for me, with no guilt attached. I opened a high-interest savings account, started contributing to my retirement aggressively, and even took a few classes I'd been putting off. My life feels mine again, and the sense of freedom is intoxicating. Occasionally, mutual friends try to mediate or hint that my brother wants to reconcile, but I've made it clear I'm not interested in half-hearted apologies that come only when someone is desperate. If he ever wants a real relationship again, it will require acknowledgement, not of the money, but of the way they treated me. Until then, I've chosen peace over guilt, and self-respect over being a convenient ATM. The funny thing is, I don't feel angry anymore. I don't even want revenge. Watching them adjust to a life they can actually afford without my silent sponsorship is its own lesson. I'm no longer carrying the burden of someone else's bad decisions or misplaced entitlement. My revenge, if you can even call it that, is in living well and refusing to ever let myself be used like that again. This upcoming Christmas, I won't be driving 6 hours to a house where I'm not wanted. Instead, I've signed up to volunteer at a local shelter that provides meals to those who truly need them. I think I'll bring some small gifts for the kids there, maybe even wrap them the way I used to for my nieces and nephews. This time, I'll know for sure that the gifts and kindness are appreciated. When I think back to that Christmas Eve, standing on the doorstep with my arms full of presents and hope, I feel a twinge of sadness, but not for me. I feel it for the family I thought I had, the bond one believed was unshakable. It wasn't real, not in the way I needed it to be. And now, I finally understand that walking away wasn't just the right choice. It was the only choice. Sometimes the best closure you can give yourself is a quiet life, built on your own terms, where love and respect are not bought, but freely given. And in that peace, I found something better than family obligation. I found myself.